Hi, everyone. So great to be back on this webinar. And I'm really happy that you joined. If you go to the next slide. So my name is Sanjeev, as many of you know. I run my own advisory firm called Sanchmo. And if you've been following some of the work I've done, you know that I'm very passionate about a few things, such as cloud migrations, data governance, data ops, and data products. So today's webinar is really important for me because cloud migrations have been a rage for the last 10 years, and I've been covering this space for a long time. But what I've noticed is that a lot of people complain when the cost goes up. And the reason for that is because there's a right way and a wrong way to do cloud migrations. The quick and easy way is lift and shift. Why? Because cloud is such an amazing place to build stuff really fast and start using it right out of the door. The problem arises when we have to operate it. So DigiKey has done this cloud migration the right way, in my opinion. I'm super impressed by what they've done. And I don't want to take up too much time because we have some exciting content to share with you. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my friends, Chris and Dan.
Thanks, Sanjeev. So from DigiKey, I got myself, Chris Kramer, and my colleague, Dan Stevie. Excited to give this webinar today with everybody on. Myself, I've been with DigiKey for 14 years now, primarily as a DBA, but kind of moving into a cloud architecture space. So that's the reason I'm doing. Dan, you want to chime in?
Yeah. So I'm a senior data engineer at DigiKey here, working for about 8 years. Worked with a variety of tools, mostly in the reporting and data space, and most recently, very excited to be working with DataOps.live and Snowflake.
And to
Thanks,
make
Dan.
this thing, we not only have DigiKey, but we are so fortunate to have Poonima. She's going to introduce herself, join us. Poonima, thank you so much for taking time from your such a busy schedule.
Oh, you're on mute, Poonima.
Poonima, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much for having me, Sanjeev. Super excited to be here, sharing the stage with Chris and Dan. I'm a senior manager for sales engineers in the manufacturing vertical at Snowflake. My career started at IBM, then worked on Hadoop, big data at Hortonworks, Cloudera, Privacera, and now at Snowflake. I contributed to a couple of projects under the Apache Software Foundation umbrella. I'm CNCF certified for Kubernetes, kind of well-versed with DevOps frameworks, and looking forward to working with several big names in the high-tech and semiconductor space at Snowflake now. Back to you, Chris.
All right, thanks. All right, for those of you that are joining us, if you don't know about DigiKey, we're headquartered in the northwest corner of Minnesota, Thief River Falls. DigiKey is the 4th largest electronics distributor in North America and 5th worldwide. Fun fact: our website predates Amazon back in 1996. So that I'm going to talk a little bit about our data history to kind of intro where we kind of been throughout the years. Probably a lot of other organizations like you have probably have a lot of data evolution over the years, and how do you bring that with you to Snowflake or the cloud? So at DigiKey over there, in the 90s, a lot of stuff, batch programming was done to create data reports against our just ERP system. Fast forward into the 2000s, we have a SQL Server-based data warehouse that was utilizing some SSRS, SSIS. Then in 2010, they brought in Oracle for data warehousing using their Exadata system, centered around Informatica's Power Center for transformation and MicroStrategy for reporting. And then following, the big data craze, we brought in Hadoop around 2014, using Hortonworks, and, we had our custom built Hortonworks cluster, custom code written, executing, and then outputting into that Oracle data warehouse. And then, we came to the conclusion around late 2019, we had, a choice to make, right? So what's out there in the marketplace for a new data warehouse system? Do we continue with Oracle Exadata? Do we continue, with that Informatica system? Do we look at new options in the marketplace? So some of the requirements we came up with when we were looking at a new data platform, we want it to be cost effective. We want to reduce that administrative overhead that, we're dealing with. We want it to be agile and responsive to changes. And we really want to reduce that time to value on creating those new initiatives that the business wants. In the tooling space, we really want, some of the DevOps development friendly features to be in that, so we can do isolation development, so we can do, hot fixing without, needing to do a full patching cycle. Automated data lineage, so that's around the data governance space. So, what affects your downstream reports, your downstream data products when you do make a change, and then how do you document that through an automated fashion without keeping spreadsheets or documents up to date. You saw we had a Hadoop system, so we had a lot of Python code written already. So, we were looking to bring that Python code along with us with minimal changes to that. And then, I mentioned some of the data governance features there. Like many orgs, we're probably lacking in the data governance space to a certain degree, and we really want to build those features up. So we really want to highlight those features and get that area really more focused these days. A little tip there, as we were doing our POCs, as I'll cover in a bit here, keep track of what you're doing on a spreadsheet as you're doing ratings, as you're doing testing. It really becomes useful later when you're kind of presenting your architecture and able to speak to those areas as you're going through, because sometimes, it can take you months, maybe years to do the length of your POC, depending on your organization size and complexity. A little bit about our timeline. So like I mentioned, late 2020, we were looking at those options. And when we, in February 21, we began our Snowflake training, did a POC with a PhData, a partner of ours, and ran through multiple POCs. It's very, we had quite the list of different options throughout our space, throughout our data platform, essentially evaluating, if we're looking at Snowflake, what are all the pieces we need to make it work with our current environment? What are some of the new features we want? What are we trying to design and figure that all out? Around September 2021, we had that architecture kind of defined in our brain. We presented that, and it took a couple months for us to kind of get that through everybody's head and kind of like reduce anybody's anxiety with that new architecture. And get that approved, get the funding, and so we could proceed forward.
So Chris, I have a question. So your organization was developed over many decades, like you showed, you had Oracle, SQL Server, Hadoop. So to get this approval done, was there a cultural shift? Did you have to redo the org? Who approved it? What was the business's role in this technology decision?
Yeah, so we really had to present it to our IT leadership in order to get approval. We had to get our current ETL team on board with those changes, having Informatica for such a long time, that there's anxiety for moving to a different platform, the anxiety of, switching code bases, the work that comes along with that. So yeah, it did take quite a bit, for us to get through that. I think the business is probably excited about like how we could get towards a faster time to value. That's always, something that takes quite a bit of time in our previous environment. So I think that's how we kind of, not necessarily sold it, but that's one of the main benefits of where we're looking for.
So faster time to value for the data.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks. So why did we go with Snowflake? Here's a few of the options. I mean, there's probably countless ones why, but zero copy cloning was a standout feature, comparing the platforms at the time we were looking at. So being able to quickly develop in isolation, so we can take a copy, have a developer spin that up, and they're not hurting, the other environment that's instantiated. They're able to get their changes tested with, the data that they need, without needing to do another copy process or, time to get that spun up, right? So a lot of value there. Data marketplace and data sharing. So the ability to get third-party data sets through the Snowflake data marketplace, being able to data share with some of the organizations we already had existing relationships through the Snowflake platform. And we can ensure some data quality, from some of those data sources that we bring in, without needing to, create more processes around it. We viewed it as a true SaaS platform. It sits on, the big three cloud providers. We use Azure mainly here at DigiKey. And then, it uses consumption-based model. So pay as you go, pay as we use it. So, as we can review costs, how do we trim those costs? We can really dive deep into those. And then, like I mentioned earlier, that reduced maintenance overhead was one of the, features we were looking for, reduce our DBA time that we're spending on those normal day-to-day maintenance type tasks, and really focus those hours on, providing business value instead. And then the scalability is, ability to scale up and out, down and in, and even, off when we're not using it through the traditional or through their virtual warehouses for compute.
Thank you, Chris. This is amazing to see all these few of the reasons. Like you said, there are actually countless reasons why you picked. And I know in a few minutes, we're going to do a deep down into your entire architecture, which will be very exciting. But before we go that far, I want to bring Poonima into this conversation. Poonima, why do people pick Snowflake?
Yeah, it mostly depends, Sanjeev. But mostly these days, we have to first get through the FUD around, Snowflake is expensive or Snowflake is only a data warehouse. For me personally, it's mostly around customer success. Where is the customer right now, and where do we want to get from there, right? And where do they basically want to get? In DigiKey's case, it was predominantly total cost of ownership. As Chris was mentioning, Snowflake is a fully managed cloud-first offering, kind of saves a lot of IT cost, eliminates the need to purchase and maintain their own on-premises data platform. I've definitely been in the Hadoop world, trying to procure, infrastructure that was a pain. The DBAs are now doing what is more valuable to business as opposed to maintaining a software. In other cases, it kind of eliminates the need for a separate data warehouse, data lake, data mart, which allows one secure data sharing across organizations, which is again something that DigiKey has used. I also really have found many customers now trying to understand the Snowflake architecture right? This kind of relies on a single elastic, very performant engine that offers high speed, scalability. It also supports a high number of concurrent users as well as workloads. Chris also kind of alluded over here how we separate compute from storage, and you're able to scale not just storage, but also compute, right? So, finally, if I have to pick a winner, I think Snowflake, the ease of setup, ease of use, the gentle learning curve, I think those are the most important ones. As soon as you get a platform, you're not learning the platform, you're using the platform, right? That's what makes more sense for us. And we're growing as a platform, and we're also seeing many workloads adoption around data science and streaming as well now.
Very nice. Yeah, that ease of use is really, really important. What's easy gets adopted. So, and I also love the way you started your answer by saying it depends. And the reason why I like this answer is because having spent my life in consulting, it depends was such a common answer that when I started my own business, I called my podcast, It Depends. So back to you, Chris. So what else do you use in your environment?
Thanks, Sanjeev. So moving on from why we chose Snowflake, and we're looking at why did we choose DataOps.live? What in the tooling space made us choose that? We were looking for an integration platform, similar to Informatica, but we're looking at it from what integrates best with Snowflake. We ended up doing multiple POCs. We evaluated what that Informatica space looked like. We also went directly to DBT directly, and then on a whim, Snowflake, another feature of theirs was the Snowflake integration partner portal. Being able to spin up essentially POC environment through a wizard through the Snowflake interface. So on a whim, we saw this DataOps.live and spun that up and gave it a test drive. So with that, we found it's an integration platform that supported multiple different orchestrators, being able to kind of enhance as we go, so to speak, as they're continuing development. If they add a new partner or a new pipe orchestrator or runner, as they used to call it, bringing in, let's say, a new integration partner, like let's say Dataiku or something like that, and they're just implementing that on their end, and we don't have to do all that plumbing work, so to speak. Another option that they have or feature is the Snowflake Object Lifecycle Engine. So this is really what stood out to me as a DBA, providing a true declarative databases code implementation using Snowflake's Terraform provider. So being able to document your database, your objects as code, using some of those development principles for code reuse, and not needing to keep track of scripts being run, being able to roll back code quickly and as you're testing and whatnot, and then going through those code approval processes. So the other side of that, the modeling and transformation engine. So that's where they're doing enhanced DBT core implementation. So when we were doing POCs, DBT really stood out as a great way to do data engineering code. So it really resonated with us. And so when we saw DataOps.live is able to provide that functionality for us, while it also has all these other features, really, it was kind of a game changer. And like I mentioned, it kind of brings those DevOps principles also to the other side of the house around data engineering, the data team, doing feature branching Git code repos, code promotion processes that really maybe weren't following 100%, the same way that our development teams do in-house. Dan, I don't know if you have anything you want to add there.
Yeah, particularly that that DevOps point at the end. I've been kind of heavily involved in handling our code promotions, and the integration with DataOps.live has made it very easy. You mentioned the zero copy cloning before with Snowflake, and the ability to have feature branches in an isolated place and be able to do whatever development you want there in its own spot, and then bring that back into the code and make it easy to promote, or if we need to roll back or do anything with it, having that DevOps capability built in has been very nice and simplified things a lot for us.
Very nice. How about Poonam? How do you use DataOps.live inside Snowflake?
Hope you're on mute, Purnima.
Sorry about that. Yeah, interestingly, DigiKey is our customer and Snowflake is a DataOps customer. We went through a very similar process. Before I get to the problem statement over here, let me just set the context. Here we had Snowflake, a system that was solid, reliable, super easy to use. And soon enough, our customers were no longer limited by compute or storage. They started playing around with data, with the intent to sell, what they started calling as data products. Again, one might ask, what is this data product? I think Forbes may have called the data product as a self-contained, data container that directly either solves a business problem or can be monetized, right? If you have to take examples, it's a predictive model or a recommendation system, even visualization dashboards, or anomaly detectors, and the list goes on, but basically you get the picture. While our customers were building these amazing world-class data products, internally at Snowflake, the field team, which I'm part of, also started building data products leveraging Snowflake just to show the art of possible. Now, if I have to get back to this problem statement, while we're building, setting up, scaling all of these data products was really getting hard. To manage our internal solutions and demos, we were kind of inundated with setup scripts, interactions with GitHub, and pretty much even managing the local Python libraries, if you will. We started coming up with new frameworks and new tech to use, like Terraform, Ansible, Docker containers, container orchestration engines like Kubernetes. They all started popping up, and we kind of soon realized that this was not going to be sustainable, and we needed to standardize on a process. So what you see at the bottom of the slide is more like our, capability statement. This is what we want to be capable of. So we knew we wanted this, this, and this, and that's when we started working with Guy and Raymond from DataOps to help us standardize on the process, which kind of will let us focus more on the actual building of the data products and less about managing and the setup. We wanted every single new feature that was coming out in Snowflake to be managed by DataOps. And as you know, the platform, Snowflake platform, is growing way too fast. So it's almost come to a point where our software development is not able to keep up with our data development. So we're trying to kind of match that. We needed a setup that was going to be dramatically simplified, like a single click deployed solution. We also wanted to have a searchable catalog, like a catalog of data products that, other users within the field could then come and use it. Support for multiple personas, multiple assets, version controlling of them. And, very key for all of this also was observability. If you actually go to the next slide, Chris.
I wanted to ask you a quick question about personas. When you say support multiple personas, can you just shed some light on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take anomaly detection, as a data product, if you will. So we have anomaly detection for healthcare, right? But we also needed anomaly detection for manufacturing shop floor. Now, it's a very similar model, very similar data flow, but the base data set itself should be different. The way the UI looks and feels will be slightly different. The metadata that's being used will be different. So now we had a publisher that was building the data model, let's say for healthcare, and published it. And now we're like, we have manufacturing industry vertical saying we want the same one, but we want it for shop floor data. So we then, needed the second persona called the hacker that would then use this base data product, make the changes as far as data set is concerned, or it could simply be just the reskinning for a new UI, and then again, publish it as a new version of that data product. So those were like the multiple personas.
Very nice. I love the data hacker persona.
And we're working very closely with DataOps on all of this. So, extremely grateful for the collaboration over here. So this slide, I definitely borrowed it from DataOps, but it kind of just gives us a glimpse of what it is at a high level. I'm not going to go into the details of this slide because I know Chris will hit on pretty much every single point at greater depth later on in the presentation. So, the heart of this mass over here is Snowflake Data Cloud. And then DataOps told us that there are 4 principal pillars that they would use to then come up with this framework. The first one over here, as you can see, is automation, right? So you have to plan on automating everything that is platform or infrastructure related. There is no more manual setup of cloud services or any other manual integrations. Everything is version controlled, and you're then projecting from that source of truth, right? Orchestration, as our modern data stacks are evolving, we tend to have some legacy tools, some new shiny tools, but eventually we do have to integrate a lot of this, and you then need to be able to orchestrate the data flowing from your sources to the consumers going through transformation. You may need ML capabilities and such. But a key underpinning of these data products is also metadata. So, you also have like that cataloging feature. You can use obviously Snowflake's catalog, which gives you lineage and access controls. But there are customers that we have that also use the likes of Collibra, Elation, and Privacera. The next one is test and observe, the third pillar. As we are releasing, many data products, as we have this hacker profile that we just spoke about that is going into multiple different versions, we definitely need each one of these data products and their versions to be tested. We didn't want it to be a bottleneck, so we wanted to make sure that the testing is also part and parcel of the automation. The last pillar, if you will, is the actual data engineers experience, right? So previously, the data engineer experience was like, you just build with the tools that you have. There was no standardization. There was no like one framework that all of us data engineers had to follow. But the interesting thing is DataOps didn't really say, oh, this is like the new framework that we have to use. They're like, you know what? Most of your requirements are very similar to the SDLC, software development lifecycle. So let's just use the same framework. Then your data engineers now, who are mostly coming from a software development background, have the same, the same methodology, the same lingo that we're using. So it's not like something new that we're bringing to the picture. So that was very, very important for us. We obviously have to make some changes for the software, the software lifecycle framework to be applied to data products. But that's the partnership that we have with DataOps. So it's been working very well for us. Again, like I said, truly grateful for this partnership.
Right, and there are about 900 field team members who are now using DataOps.
Correct. We'll start using pretty soon. So we have like a very small, it's being released in limited scope at this point, but eventually it will be released to that 900 plus field engineers.
Thank you so much. This was your articulation of this was extremely clear and very compelling. So we're going to go back to DigiKey team because now we're going to start doing some deep dives into your architecture.
Thanks, Sanjeev. So yeah, let's talk about how we were able to build that new platform. It's going to be broken down here. One of the feedback when I was building this deck, if I show the big picture all at once, it's a little hard to see. So we'll go kind of like Purnima had in different areas at the bottom of her slide. We'll kind of cover those spots in isolation, and then we'll put it together at the end here. So starting at like everybody's left side of their data platform, typically, we have our data sources. So at DigiKey here, we have lots of data sources. They really run the gamut. We've got our normal RDBMS databases, NoSQL databases, Oracle, SQL Server, and Mongo. We also have a streaming Kafka platform. We use Confluent for that here at DigiKey. And APIs, we have internal APIs and we have third-party APIs that we get data in and out from. So to pull some data in, we needed to be able to integrate those. Lots of flat files, as some of you probably know throughout your orgs, files aren't dead yet. That's still a valid way for transferring data and information. So that's how some of these integrations have to be done still to this day. And then another benefit that I had mentioned earlier, that Snowflake data shares and marketplace, being able to get data from external third parties. So that was a new capability we were able to add through data sharing, and then also getting data marketplace data. Kind of that next layer, the data ingestion piece. So one thing you'll notice here, we already have DataOps showing up here. There's a purple color to any box that we feel DataOps felt valued. Kind of wanted to highlight that here, so just keep an eye out that as we're going through here. So Click, we tested multiple CDC platforms, change data capture. So that's bringing in our RDBMS and NoSQL data directly in. We have source and history loads for those to facilitate the needs of the data engineering team. We already actually had Click prior to evaluating this, so one of the things that was kind of easy when we were doing the testing. So Kafka platform itself has built-in connectors, so this was a kind of a bonus. We didn't have to kind of go out and find another option. So once we tested this and found that it works, it was kind of an easy button for us on our Kafka ingestion. So being able to use the Confluent Snowflake connector, being able to directly ingest that Kafka data into the Snowflake platform made it easy for our team to use. And like I mentioned earlier, we had a lot of Python code already written for our Hadoop in data ingestion. And so we were able to bring that along with our DataOps migration with both our API ingestion and flat file ingestion methodologies. I don't know, Dan, do you want to give any other highlights here?
Yeah, I think mentioning that we were able to bring most of that Python code with a little bit of adjustments, but that was really great from a migration perspective when we were on a tight timeline to not have to rebuild everything from scratch there, and use what we had already been using for quite some time.
Thanks, Dan. Kind of moving on. Now this one will be a little bit of a pie chart, but I couldn't break it down too much smaller without losing some of the detail here. So on the left here, so this is where we land all of our data into Snowflake and our data lake layer. So at the bottom there, so cloud file storage. So those flat files, they're a file. So we really needed to put that into a file storage area. One of the benefits of Snowflake is they can integrate data lake or cloud data storage from all the top 3 providers very easily. And even if, let's say in our case, we're using an Azure deployed Snowflake interface, we can integrate to a GCS bucket or an S3 bucket directly without needing to do another copy from those platforms. We're able to put that, as you can see, data lake layer where it points to wherever that storage is, without needing to data move that quite yet.
Do you guys use Apache Iceberg format?
We don't these days. I know I'm just seeing public preview for that, so maybe that's something we'll test. Maybe Purnima can give us some details on that.
Yes. Okay.
On our left there, so for those flat files specifically, we really wanted to standardize them. Sometimes, as you know, file formats can change. So we really wanted to standardize that. So we wrote some Python code to convert those into JSON objects using Snowflake's variant column, and provide any other data quality checks. And so we were able to leverage DataOps to run, again, that process that we've written. And then everything else lands in that source layer. It'll become more apparent in the final picture, but we try to get everything to that source layer before moving into that next data transformation, data warehouse bucket here. So our previous Informatica bucket, so we have had to migrate a lot of code from Informatica to DBT. It's probably one of our most lengthy parts of the migration, because you're taking code and taking that platform and rewriting it. So we knew that was going to be fairly lengthy, but it also allows us to do code reuse and some other benefits that we were able to do. So talking about going from source to our consume layer here, as most people do, maybe prepare the data, right? So we're going to do some light transformations, maybe some cleanup like space padding or any small transformation, just to get that data sanitized to a certain degree. Probably following similar models like the raw, curated, and then final consumption, or I've seen like bronze, silver, gold. Those are similar methodologies. It's I think everybody has the same thing, just different names. But so in between those, you see the data ops processes. We're using DBT. We can add data quality checks. So going through transforms. So those would be those larger data warehouse transformations. Modeling. Let's say dimension facts. Those sorts of things we're able to do. And then on the right side there, you can see, we've got analytics data that's coming into, through interaction. It'll make more sense later. At that final section, we end up at our consume layer. That's where we want most of our data consumers getting their data from. Extract, so that's where we're getting data that's going to go outside our walls, so to speak. So we wanted to isolate that to a degree. And then data science, we do a lot of data science at DigiKey, so we're able to integrate with another product. That'll make sense in the next slide here. As those data products gets developed out of that product, we're able to integrate those into our other processes as well. Dan, anything you wanted to add here?
Yeah. So as an engineer working on kind of building these models and working in this space, I've noticed a couple of really great benefits of kind of the way this architecture is set up. At each level of these layers, this source layer, prepare, transform, something that's very nice for engineers is that it's pretty well defined what we expect there. You mentioned we have that DataOps process with Python to convert everything to JSON in the source layer, regardless of what the input file looks like, which is great. I know that I'm going to have JSON in the source layer, and it's not going to be some crazy sort of structure that I'm unfamiliar with. And the same thing goes for the prepare and the transform. We know what we're expecting out of the prepare layer, what sort of cleanup that we're going to do there. And we can put the data quality in check, or sorry, data quality checks in place to ensure that that's happening correctly there. Same goes for transform, where all the transformations are happening. And the thing that I like about the data quality checks in each of these processes is that we catch things early if data's off, right? We can put not null checks in for IDs, and now we can catch if that happens at the prepare layer, as opposed to getting an email from somebody who has a final report going, hey, something looks off here. So those are the main benefits that I've seen working on this platform here.
Dan, I have a question for you about automation. When new data gets ingested into any of these three places, ADLS, GCS, or S3, how do you do automation where DataOps orchestrator knows there's a new file, kicks off the Python program, does the conversion to JSON, and then into DBT? How does that work?
Yeah, so we have a separate orchestrator, Active Batch, which I believe we use through an API implementation to call our Python code that runs these programs, to either do the ingest, to do the transformation, to do the extract out. And so we have our own scheduler built in there, doing things like running things just on a time schedule, checking for a file to be dropped in a location, or looking for an email from somebody. So we have this hooked up to, an external scheduler, which we've had around and brought over from our old system, and we're able to implement with there.
Thank you.
Great question, Sanjeev. Moving on to the data consumption layer. So as I mentioned earlier, again, we had MicroStrategy here at DigiKey. So we really knew we couldn't get rid of that platform. We still had to bring it along. So that was a big piece. So we actually had Tableau. So we've just been on a conversion from Tableau to Sigma. Hadoop platform had a notebooks app called, I believe, it's not Jupyter, it's the other one. I forget the name off the top of my head. So we had a couple reports or applications that use that. So we were able to leverage Hex for that, to convert those over. I'll cover the data science platform. We had Dataiku right before we kind of went into this POC for doing Snowflake. So we knew we had to bring that along. So that was able to integrate with kind of all the things we're doing. Atlan is our data catalog now. We were using Alation before, and we felt Atlan provided the best features for us kind of going forward with some of the stuff we're interacting with Snowflake. And then, similar, we had data extraction apps written. So, like in the ingestion layer, we were able to reuse a lot of that Python code for those extracts. And then our batch reports, it's like the thing that won't die, but we still needed them. So we were able to use our DigiKey Python batch reports and use those against Snowflake. And then, like I mentioned earlier, additional Snowflake capabilities, being able to share data out to third parties through the Snowflake data sharing, eliminating the need for, let's say, an SFTP or an additional hop. So it really provides value for that third party and us to reduce that time for them to get that data. You can see some of the data extraction targets. There's email. Like, can't get away from that, it seems. Getting data back into Google Analytics. Whether it's Excel, text, CSV, interacting with third-party APIs, and then again, being able to drop files on any of the cloud storage layers. Dan, anything you wanted to add here? I know you're heavily involved in this set as well.
Yeah, not too much. I think you covered it pretty well. In a data-driven world, there's a ton of different places that you have to be able to get data to, and I'm sure this slide will only grow as we go on here. So
yeah, Pernima, yeah, Zeppelin was the feature for Hadoop. Yeah, so that's one we had to convert. Just going to talk briefly about data governance. So as I mentioned earlier, something we're still striving for. I think every organization is doing that. So being able to do things around data governance within both their data platform and data products. So access and role management, being able to define, the access that people get in Snowflake, what database or schema or table level, view level access, being able to define that in code. So it's really able to, let's say we got audited, you could really dive deep into the code and show that, versus it'd be really hard to get data gather that for an audit through a manual process. Like Dan mentioned, that data quality, ensuring those data quality checks, testing and validation is done as we progress. So, we don't want to provide bad data at the consumer level. So catching those errors as soon as we can, reducing those data anomalies or bad data, so to speak. Mentioned this earlier, but documentation and those lineage artifacts. So keeping track of those over the years was very hard. So way to automate that through the platform and as a kind of a bonus was really a benefit for us. Be able to keep that very agile, so we can provide that data to our data consumers so they can know, like, hey, where did this data product come from? Where does this factor dimension table derive from? What is the definition of this table column? And then talking a little bit about our data science platform initiative. So, we can code our Snowflake enabled data warehouse, Snowflake warehouses. So that's a recent, within the last year, feature on Snowflake. So being able to have those higher RAM and Spark enabled clusters was much of a benefit for us to enable those data science workloads to have that additional power while being more cost effective as well. Quickly, as Dan mentioned, being able to onboard new data sources or technologies or extracts for data science, because they're a very high dollar resource. So being able to get those resources in as quickly reduces our time to value on those sorts of initiatives. And then with our platform, being able to orchestrate all the ins and outs through code and through modern data DevOps principles, DataOps principles is very handy in our case. Quick value story. So we were able to develop a data science fraud detection model and apply that to our ordering process, and that really enabled us to get off of our credit card providers fraudulent charges list. For those that it's not a list you want to be on. So being able to reduce our fraud orders or fraudulent credit card orders was a benefit for us. Now, putting it all together, coming back to that whole picture idea, I think will make it a little bit more clear where DataOps kind of integrates and what it's doing, as well as how it interacts with some of the other features. So on that left, you see where that data sources layer is. And then second column, you see that data integration layer, where that data goes through. And in the middle, you see where that data ultimately gets landed and processed. And then ultimately how it gets consumed here. At the bottom, you can see some of the integration points as well. Like Dan mentioned, we had our enterprise job scheduler already previously. So again, as DataOps has shown, able to integrate that very easily with their platform and do that quite easily. Ability to store our secrets outside of our code base into a platform, a secrets manager. We're using Azure Key Vault for that, but you can use AWS Secrets Manager, and again, directly integrate that through the DataOps platform. And then we have our code base already in Azure DevOps, so able to sync that directly within DataOps.live. Again, makes it easy for our organization to use the tools that we're normally accustomed to, but then enable us to be more productive. And then, like I mentioned in the data governance, being able to define those schema level or Snowflake level permissions through DataOps. And then on the Snowflake side, being able to sync that user authorization to our Active Directory and role sync, and then also integrate our user authentication through our identity provider ping. That really covers the gamut. And you can kind of see, why we didn't want to show this initially, because it's just maybe an eye chart for most people. But there's a lot of complexity here, as most of you probably know, within a data platform, within your architecture of providing data products in your org. So you can really see all those purple boxes in here of where we've been able to integrate for us. Using DataOps. And then one last thing here, you can see this DBT artifact. So being able to push those artifacts directly into the data catalog. It goes to that data governance point about being able to automate the documentation of those features to your data consumers. We're still learning stuff on our migration. Converting our code has been kind of our most lengthy process. So we're using some views to create a semantic layer while we're doing some conversions still. But things I wanted to point out, so really, when you're looking at a cloud strategy, you really got to develop a FinOps or a financial operations mindset. You got to be vigilant when monitoring and planning those costs. Data observability, knowing when your processes are broken and resolving those problems quickly, and understanding what's happening within your processes. And then data governance, like I said, it takes a lot of time, so you don't want to eat the elephant, so to speak. So we break your work into smaller chunks so you can get it done, so to speak. So I think that's it. And we're at Q&A. Sanjeev, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. This was phenomenal. There's so many interesting topics you covered, the entire gamut of data and analytics in just one shot. So thank you so much for doing that, and Dan for that. Leanne, do we have any questions that have come in?
Yeah, just a reminder to everybody, if you want to ask a question, you can add it into the Q&A function. But we do have a couple, some of them I think the team has already kind of touched on a little bit, but maybe we can do a summary as well. So the first one for Chris was really, how did DigiKey select DataOps.live? I know you told us kind of how you found it, but what was your overall eval criteria, and did you look at other tools?
Yeah, like I mentioned, we were on Informatica, so we did look at it. Informatica's cloud-based product. We evaluated DBT, their cloud version. And then, like I said, on a whim, we found DataOps.live and we're able to test that as well. And, that really, put everything we were looking for together in one platform.
Awesome. We have one come in really around Snowflake. So this is for Purnima. And again, you did a great job of summarizing everything, but can you give us an idea of how your customers quantify benefit of using both DataOps.live and Snowflake?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very metric driven in the field. So it's kind of easy for us to measure. So the first one would be time to market on these data products. The number of data products that are showing up in our catalog is a good measure. And usage on these data products would be the next one. Yes, someone is building these data products, but who is using it and how often are they using it? From a variation standpoint, how many different versions of these data products have been built? We have multiple personas like we just discussed. We have publishers building, but we also have hackers creating these different versions, like a simple metric around that also. But if you really have to ask me, I think the main driver for us is the total cost of ownership, right? So that's what, instead of each one of us building our own, we'd rather use a framework, we'd rather use a tool that standardizes the process, and we're like focusing on what's more value generating as opposed to just managing the data products.
Awesome. We had a question come in from Sunny, which is, what data modeling tools, techniques did you use? Did you investigate Data Vault 2.0 or just Kimball approach?
Gotcha. So that, I know, Dan, we don't have like our data architects on, but we had a lot of existing code that we already had for doing traditional Kimball data warehousing techniques. So we didn't really change that, so to speak. So we really brought that along with us. As we're doing kind of non-traditional, what we call data products, allowing users to kind of develop what they want, at least within their domains, before we, let's say, enterprise level trust that. So we're really trying to do a little bit more flexibility on data models, at least at a domain, like a department-based level. And really, post-migration, we'll probably look at that even more. But it's been quite the migration process already. But like I said, we had a lot of Kimball or traditional fact dimension models.
Awesome. We had another question from Venkat, which is, hopefully we'll see this recording after the meeting, and absolutely we will share the recording. But the final question I'll leave with Sanjeev is, what new functionality do you see from DataOps tools? And I'll let you kind of close out the webinar.
So, thank you so much, Leanne. I see some of the things have already been answered. In fact, it was on Chris's thing of where they're going next is FinOps. I see now that DataOps.live has information about the entire DAG or the pipeline. It has all the metrics. So the ability to, what Purnima said, measure who's using it, how often it's being used. If it's not being used, then let's retire it. What is the cost? The cost per data product, cost allocated per department, or for the workload. So that data observability at the financial level, in addition to doing data observability at quality and reliability, are the things that I'm most excited about. With that, I'll come to an end. Thank you, everyone. So, Leanne, do you want to bring us home?
That's it. Thanks to Chris and Dan so much for being a part of the webinar. We really appreciate all of your efforts around this. Purnima, thank you. Sanjeev, thank you. Again, we will provide the recording afterwards. But again, everybody have a good day, good evening. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.